And we're back. The Amsterdam Torture Museum in the Netherlands. This is episode 3 within part 1. And we left off with stocks and pillories, and the concept at hand is the technique of stress and arrest, which is putting victims in awkward positions for prolonged periods of time. Let us move forward with more images. And what we have here is a victim, a woman, being whipped. And those who are carrying out the whipping appear to be nuns, women from the convent, which underscores and reinforces the notion that there are moral and religious forces at play. We'll talk a little bit more about the significance of morality and religion. But let's get a little bit of context here. Whipping was the only form of painful questioning considered legally permissible for minors. Furthermore, public whipping was a customary penance or mutilative punishment. The instrument varied from whips weighted with iron to light lashes and rods. Afterwards, the lighter instruments were used for centuries to support education. An 18th century schoolmaster from South Germany may well hold the record in the use of the rod. He proudly declared that to have delivered more than 911,000 strokes of the cane and 124,000 blows with the rod during his entire 51-year career. So here we see another aspect of punishment and torture, which is the interlocking of these techniques in other social institutions, namely education. And that reminds us that the energy of punishment and of torture migrates from one particular social space to another. More about theory later. Here we see another woman subject to a whipping. And if you see what's happening in the background, you have a congregation of men, which is reinforcing this notion that men are very much part of the larger framework, the larger paradigm by which these punishments and tortures are carried out. And the subjugation of women, of course, that's at the forefront. And this is a bit difficult to make out, this engraving, but let me point to over here on the left-hand side, because it appears that a victim who is being restrained is being manhandled by a torturer who has a blade, a knife, and he appears to be attempting to remove his tongue. Now, as you stare at this particular object, let me add a little bit of social theory. A little bit. Michel Foucault, a luminary in philosophy and the sociology of punishment, gave torture and corporal punishment a great deal of thought. And this is where we get the A theory of the human body. And I'm grateful to our esteemed colleague, Professor David Garland at NYU, who writes at length in his book, Punishment and Modern Society. He writes at length of the significance of Foucault and the impact that Foucault has on a sociology of punishment. The human body, from the standpoint of Foucault, as David Garland writes, is the ultimate material which is seized and shaped by all political, economic, and penal institutions. That bears repeating. The human body is the ultimate material which is seized and shaped by all political, economic, and penal institutions. Now, what is this item before us? This is, according to the text, the Spanish horse, used for questioning, interrogation. Pain was increased to the limits of the bearable means. Spanish is a direct reference to the notorious Spanish Inquisition. Again, religious and moral context. This institution was established in 1478 with the purpose of controlling divergent ethnic and religious groups within the larger Spanish Empire under one single religious and political authority. In Spain itself, this process had 3 stages. First was the forced conversion of Jews and Muslims, as well as the elimination, extermination of their non-Christian customs. Third, the annihilation of witchcraft. Now, a little bit more philosophy, a little bit more, is Baudrillard, French philosopher. And he wrote famously, "Forgetting the extermination is part of the extermination." Forgetting the extermination is part of the extermination. So as these empires, these political as well as religious empires, as they expand, they annihilate other customs, other belief systems in their path. This is the Spanish horse, which gets its name from the Spanish Inquisition. And this is it. This image demonstrates what it looks like in action. You have the victim off to the left, and you can see the feet are being weighted by large chunks of stone. You might recall, foreshadowing, at the very beginning of this tour, we saw a photograph with large chunks of cement. And here we see how those large chunks of weight are used. The victim is being restrained from behind. He is being placed on this large wooden contraption, and his own weight is creating his own pain. The executioner. He was referred to as the master of high works, and indeed, the executioner's foul job required a fair amount of skill. High on the scaffold, he was supposed to convince his public of the fact that, albeit severe, the sentence that was about to be executed was fair. A swift and well-aimed coup de grace was rewarded with applause from the audience, the spectacle. The first stroke is the one that counts. Although the executioners were merely performing their official duties, they and their families were the most despised members or outcasts in their society. The authorities purposely cultivated these feelings. They dressed up the executioner in public as he went on about his everyday chores in a multicolored apparel. This could be recognized from the townspeople as a semiotic reminder of the presence of punishment. The executioner. Now, this particular item on display is not accompanied by any text. So it requires a visitor with knowledge on what this item is, how it was used, and how it might very well be used today. This is the waterboard. The victim's head would be placed on this end of the incline, being restrained by the hands. The feet would be placed in this wooden frame, and there's a bit of an enclosure that could grapple the ankles. The waterboard. More about that later. This is the whipping post. This appears to be the real deal. You can see the marks, the scars, and so on and so forth. The whipping post. Authenticity. Being the real deal in this exhibition adds to the overall authentic narrative about torture. Now we're going to take a real quick pause and come back and continue.